Welcome to episode 32 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we finish with the epic tale of Heracles, with the chapter Heracles, Iole, and Deianira, his end. The last venture which Heracles undertook was an expedition against Eurytus, king of Oechalia, for whom he cherished an ancient grudge for having refused him his daughter Iole. He assembled a mighty host of Greeks and marched to Euboea to besiege Eurytus and his sons in their city. As he was victorious, the lofty palace was shattered and lay in the dust, the king and his 3 sons slain, and the entire city destroyed. Iole, who was still young and fair, was the captive of Heracles. Deianira had anxiously been awaiting news of her husband. At last, a joyful clamor broke out in the palace. A messenger had come at full speed and gave his news to eager listeners. "Your husband lives, O princess," he cried. "He will return in all glory of his conquest. And even now he is bringing the first fruits of the battle to his native gods. His servant, Lichas, whom he had sent to follow me, is proclaiming the victory to the people out on the open plain. He himself delayed only because he is making offerings of thanks to Zeus on the promontory of Sinum in Euboea." Soon after, Lichas, the attendant of Heracles, arrived, and with him the captives. "Hail to you, wife of my lord," he addressed Deianira. "The immortals abhor wrongdoing. They have prospered the just cause of Heracles. They who lived sumptuously and boasted with an evil tongue have all been speeded to Hades. But these prisoners whom we have brought with us, your husband commends to you, your Mary, above all, this unhappy girl who has thrown herself at your feet." Deianira gazed compassionately on the lovely young creature, radiant with beauty, raised her from the ground, and said, "I have always ached with pity whenever I saw luckless people who had lost their homes dragged through alien lands, and the freeborn suffering the lot of slaves. O Zeus, O conqueror, may you never lift your arm to inflict such sorrow upon my house. But who are you, poor girl? You are still a virgin, it seems, and the child of a noble house. Tell me, Lichas, who are her parents?" "How should I know? Why do you ask?" he replied evasively, but his face betrayed that he was harboring a secret. After a brief pause, he continued, "She certainly does not come from one of the humble homes in Iole," since the girl herself only sighed and kept silence. Deianira refrained from further questioning and had her taken into the house and treated with courtesy and kindness. While Lichas carried out her commands, the messenger who had been first to arrive approached his mistress, and when he thought himself unobserved, whispered, "Do not trust the man your husband sent, Deianira. He is concealing the truth from you. I, in the middle of the marketplace of Trachis, in the presence of countless witnesses, heard him say that your husband Heracles destroyed the lofty palace of Oechalia solely because of this girl. She whom have welcomed into her house is Iole, the daughter of Eurytus. Iole, for whom Hercules burned with love before he ever knew you. Now she is come not as your slave, but as your rival and his concubine." When Deianira heard this, she broke into loud lament, but quickly composed herself and sent Lichas for her husband's servant. At first he swore by Zeus, the king of all gods, that he had told her the truth, that he did not know who the girl's parents were. For a long time he obstinately clung to this lie, but by that same Zeus, Deianira implored him not to mock her any longer. Even if it were possible for me to resent my husband's faithfulness, she told him fully, I am not so ignoble as to cherish hatred for this girl who has never done me any harm. For her I have nothing but compassion, for her beauty has not only wrought havoc upon her own happiness, but has even caused her country to become enslaved. When Lichas heard her express such kindly feelings, he confessed everything. Deianira dismissed him with no hint of reproach, and only told him to wait until she had prepared a gift for her husband as a gracious return for the train of captives he had sent her. Far from any ray of light, in strict obedience to the centaur's directions, Deianira had hidden the clotted blood she had collected from around his poisonous wound. Now, for the first time since she had so carefully concealed it in that secret place, did the princess, in her torment of jealousy, think of the magic ointment. Ignorant of the snare spun by the vengeful Nessus, she thought it merely a love charm that would effect nothing but the regaining of her husband's heart. She must act at once. Softly, she crept to that chamber, and with the tuft of a white lamb's wool which she had dipped in the salve, she secretly dyed a gorgeous tunic to be sent to Heracles. While she busied herself with the work, she scrupulously shielded from the sun both the wool and the stuff that was dyeing, laid the crimson garment in fair folds, and locked it in a box. When all was done, she threw the tuft of wool, which was of no further use, on the floor, summoned Lichas, and put in his hand the gift for Heracles. Take this to my husband, she said. It is a garment I wove with my own hands. None shall wear it but he. Nor shall he expose the stuff to fire or the light of the sun before the day of offerings, when he shall solemnly adorn himself in it for the gods. For I made a vow that all this should be so if he returned home to me as victor, and that this is really my wish and my message he shall see by this signet which I entrust to you. Lichas promised to do as his mistress had bidden him. Not an instant longer did he remain in the palace, but he hurried to Euboea, so that his lord, who was performing the rites of offering, might receive the greetings from home as soon as possible. A few days passed, and Hylas, the eldest son of Heracles and Deianira, went to join his father to describe to him his mother's impatience and to urge him to hasten his return. In the meantime, Deianira happened to enter the chamber where she had dyed the tunic with the magic ointment. She found the tuft she had carelessly tossed aside lying on the floor in the full light of the sun and warmed by its beams. But she recoiled by the sight of it, for the wool had crumbled to dusty fragments, and from this brittle shreds a poisonous foam bubbled forth with a hissing sound. Weighed down by a dim premonition of what she had done, the wretched woman wandered through the rooms of the palace in agony of unrest. At last, Hylas returned, and he came alone. "Oh, mother," he called to her, and his voice was harsh with hatred, "I wish you had never lived, that you were not my mother, or that the gods had imbued you with another spirit." The queen, who was already troubled by the vague forebodings, startled at the words of her son. "What is this? Why are you so hateful to me, my child?" she asked. "I come from the promontory of Sinium, mother," her son answered, and paused because he was shaking with sobs. "It is you who have robbed me of my father." Deianira grew pale as death, but she collected her strength sufficiently to ask, "And who tells you this, my father? Who dares accuse me of such a terrible crime?" No one, said her son, no one told me there was no need, for with my own eyes I saw my father's pitiful end. I reached him on Sinium just as he was about to rear to an altar to conquering Zeus and slaughter victims for thanks offerings. Then Lichas, his attendant, came bearing your gift, the death-bringing tunic. Obedient to your wish, my father at once put it on, and thus adorned became the sacrifice of 12 stately bullocks. At first, pleased with the beautiful garment you sent, he prayed joyfully and serenely. But when the flames at the altars leaped heavenward, he broke into a sweat. The tunic seemed welded to his body as though by a smith, and tremors shook him from head to foot, as if an adder were feeding upon his flesh. He called aloud for Lichas, the guiltless bearer of the poisoned tunic. He came and innocently repeated what you had bidden him to say. My father seized him by the foot, dashed him to death on the cliffs near the sea, and hurled his shattered limbs into the beating waves. All the people were horror-stricken at this mad deed, but no one dared approach raving Heracles. Now he rolled on the ground. Now he sprang up, screaming with pain, and the rocks and the wooded mountains echoed his cries. He cursed you and the marriage which was now to end with his death. Finally he turned to me and said, My son, if you feel pity for your father, carry me abroad at once, so that I will not die on alien soil. Thereupon we bore him into the ship, and now, writhing with pain, he has reached his own land. Soon you will see him, perhaps alive, perhaps dead. And all this is your work, mother. You have shamefully done to death the most glorious hero of all time. Deianira made no reply to his bitter charge. She did not try to clear herself, but left her son Hylas in silent despair. Then some of the house servants, to whom she had once confided the secret of how the magic ointment given her by Nessus would ensure her husband's faithfulness, told the boy that his rage toward his mother was unjust. He ran after her, but he came too late. She lay in her chamber, stretched dead on her husband's bed, a double-edged sword in her breast. Hylas threw his arms about her and flung himself across the bed, regretting the impetuous words. His father's coming interrupted his self-reproaches. Son, he cried, where are you? Unsheath your sword, use it against your father. Sever my neck from my body, and heal the frenzy which your godless mother has stricken me. Do not delay. Have pity on me, a hero crying like a girl. Then he turned to those around him, stretched out his arms in agony, and moaned, Do you still recognize these, though the strength has been taken from them? They are the ones that slew the terror of shepherds, the Nemean lion, that strangled the Hydra, that helped put an end to the Erymanthian boar, and carried Cerberus out of Hades. No spear, no wild beast of the forest, no host of giants could overwhelm me. But now I am destroyed by a woman's hand. My son, kill me and punish your mother. But when Hylas told his father, swearing to the truth of his words, that his mother had never intended disaster for her husband, and that she had atoned for her thoughtless act by inflicting death upon herself, the wrath of Heracles ebbed and turned to sorrow. He betrothed his son Hylas to Iole, his captive, whom he himself had once loved. And since an oracle had been issued from Delphi that he was to end his life on Mount Oeta in the region of Trachis, he had himself carried up to the peak in spite of the intensity of his pain. He had his people heap a funeral pyre on which he had himself laid, and now he bade them light the woodpile from below. But no one was willing to obey him. Desperate with pain, the hero urged his request until his friend Philoctetes agreed to do what he had asked. In gratitude, Heracles handed him his ever-victorious bow and arrows, which no one could withstand. The instant the pyre was lit, lightning flashed from heaven and quickened the flames. Then a cloud floated down, encircled the pyre, and bore the immortal hero to Olympus, while the air shook with thunder. When the pyre had burned to the ground, they found not a single bone of the hero. No longer could they doubt that, true to the decree of the gods, Heracles had been taken from the bounds of earth and set among the immortals. They prepared the sacrifice and tendered him the honors due to a god. All of Greece worshipped him as a deity. In heaven, Athene received the immortal hero and led him to the circle of the gods. Now that his earthly course was run, even Hera became reconciled with him. She gave him her daughter Hebe to wife, the goddess of everlasting youth, who on the shining peak of Olympus bore him children, beautiful and deathless. And here I end my tale for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.